is now 4:34. Breaking from overnight, we're learning more about the victims after a school shooting in Nashville left 6 people and the shooter dead. Among those 6 killed, 3 9-year-old children and 2 school employees. We're hearing that the shooter was a former student at the school investigators have identified as Audrey Hale. That shooting, just the latest tragedy. Here in Connecticut, advocacy groups along with Sandy Hook parents are sharing their thoughts. Channel 3 Eyewitness News reporter Olivia Schuler has local reaction to another mass shooting. Good morning, Olivia.
Hey, Caitlin, good morning. Well, parents brought their child to school Monday morning to that school in Nashville, unknowing to what would unfold hours later. Now, here in Connecticut, families, some of them know that pain personally. We spoke to some parents and former students of the Sandy Hook shooting, and they say incidents like this are happening all too often. Scarlett Lewis's son Jesse was killed at 6 years old at the hands of gun violence at Sandy Hook. Lewis says mass shootings should never happen, but they are frequently. 11 years later, after the devastation in Newtown, and in this year alone, the Gun Violence Archive reports 129 mass shootings just in 2023. Former Sandy Hook student Jordan Gomez says she believes mass shootings can be suppressed in part by banning assault weapons on a federal level.
We need to stop beating around the bush and pretending that the assault weapons ban in particular, which has been an incredibly controversial piece of legislation in the past, would not be extremely effective in curbing this issue.
Gomez says we also need to take a deeper look at mental health. She says people need to look into what pain is causing people's emotions to escalate and perform such brutal attacks. Some lawmakers are calling on massive changes when it comes to assault weapons. Now, Senator Chris Murphy put out a tweet saying that in 1994, when assault weapons were banned, there was a drastic drop in mass shootings. When that ban expired, mass shootings went back up. Reporting live in Hartford, Olivia Schuler, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.